Employment and jobs creation.
Yeah.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, sir.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Nice to see you. I recall I think it's been many years since I last saw you.
Yes, it has.
Yes,
it has
I think the last time I saw you, I did an interview with you on Alaje.
Exactly.
Since then, we haven't actually met.
Absolutely. Yes.
How have things been with you?
Quite well. I mean, it's a very tough economy, so we all have to find a way to manage and hope that the future led by an NDC government may prove much better than it has been for the last 8 years. It's a difficult time for Ghanaians, for everybody, and I believe that that difficulty probably will spur an NDC victory come December 7th.
Great. I wanted to take your thoughts briefly on the matter that you just heard. On Ndc'S exit and what happens to a party.
Well, I mean, I think that the crisis that you're seeing reflects the fact that she was a dominant personality, and probably the party was built
around it,
just around her as a personality. That's a danger of building parties around personalities, because when they disappear, then you find the fragmentation and disintegration that we're seeing now. But I hope they're able to solve the problem, and it's always good to have more contestants in the presidential elections, and I hope Mr. Apiakubi, Rowan Father, is able to continue and hold the flag high for Ghana Freedom Party in memory of Ikwadonko.
I don't know, but this must be the longest ballot paper we've seen. 13 candidates so far. I know the 2000 elections were quite dramatic, but it was not 13 candidates, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't 13 candidates. But it just shows you the level of interest that, and the level of self-belief that a lot of people have, that they can manage the affairs of this rather complex country within the context of a very complex and involved international environment. And I believe that many people believe that they have the capacity, so why not? They're quite welcome to do that and to test their popularity and their policies with the sovereign Ghanaian people.
And like you said, it takes some self-belief.
Absolutely.
For you to stand to contest these elections, hoping to be president.
Exactly.
You just talk about the state of the country. Are you surprised so many people believe that they can manage out of this crisis that we find ourselves in?
I'm not surprised. I mean, you do find in truly democratic countries all kinds of people filing to become president, all kinds of causes, from the most minuscule cause to the biggest causes. So it's not anything that surprises me, and it's not something that we should discourage. The important thing is that as much as possible as we evolve and develop and consolidate and mature our democracy, we begin to look much more at issues, much more at the policy programs of the various people who want to contest, the parties, NDC's manifesto and so on, and see how that affects us in our daily lives and how that can transform and change our well-being and our livelihoods for a better experience, both at the household level, community, and at the national level.
I've been going through the manifesto of the NDC. You've been involved in this process. In fact, in 2020, you were involved.
Yes, I was.
This year, too, you are involved.
Yes.
Now, when you go back because you are putting together this manifesto knowing the challenge ahead.
Yes.
And they say elections are a contest of ideas. Are you seeing that the work you did, putting forward to the Ghanaian people, are you seeing a competition of other ideas that you find, I don't know the word to use, but quite louder?
Before you put together any kind of document of this importance, which basically determines the direction that the party and the flag bearer, John Mahama, wants to take this country, clearly you have to do a lot of work, a lot of study, a lot of consultation. And I believe that in putting together this important document, a lot of consultation with potential stakeholders, actual stakeholders, in the various segments of the economy, in the various segments of civil society and so on, various segments of social services, even international actors, and partners were consulted for their views in light of the problems that we have, because you cannot write a manifesto and then not actually assess the current realities and the current challenges that the country faces as a result of the poor policies of the MPP over the last 8 years. Because, as you know, we have a situation where inflation has gone haywire and to levels that are quite astonishing. To 54%, now it's down to about 21.5%. Interest rates are very high, 27%. The city is collapsing after enjoying a month or so of stability. It's now around 1720. That's what I saw before I came into the studio.
Okay.
And you have a situation where government's revenues basically are not able to support its expenditure, and therefore government has to borrow. And then we have a huge debt overhang from 120 billion cedis to 760 billion cedis. And that debt overhang is temporarily suspended because of the restructuring agreements with the Euro bond holders and also with the domestic debt program. But that is going to catch up with us in 2026 when we start paying. So you will see that even without the charge of debt repayments and also debt payments of interest, the city itself is wobbling still. So how much more when we start paying those debts and we need more foreign exchange to service those obligations? Of course, then we're going to have a lot of problems. So in crafting the manifesto, we have taken all these into account. And basically, the thrust of the economic policy is to stabilize the current situation so we don't have a further slide. Secondly, to put in the policies that incentivize business, that makes government more efficient to be able to recover, grow the economy, and then gradually transform the economy to a more self-reliant, more capable, able economy that's able to meet the aspirations of Ghanaians, especially their basic needs in terms of food, because, you know, we've had substantial food price inflation, and what some people even say that there's been a lot of price gouging. You go to the market today, you buy 5 cedis of tomatoes. The next day, the same tomatoes cost 7 cedis, and so on and so forth. And that's, of course, has a very negative impact on income and household income. And as I speak now, about 7.3 million Ghanaians find it very hard to afford and achieve 1 square meal a day. In the last, in 2022, about 875,000 Ghanaians were thrown into poverty because of a crisis. Some of it contributed by COVID, but quite a lot of it also contributed by the mismanagement of the economy. And then we have, as a reality, and this should worry all of us, 41.3% of the Ghanaian population is multidimensionally poor. And 8.2 million of the 11.9 million workforce works in what we call vulnerable employment, or what we call the working poor. These are people like the kids you see on the street selling. They don't sell dog chains anymore.
They sell all kinds of things.
They sell a multitude of imported items, and water and so on, sweating in this terrible heat. Some women with babies on their backs, but just trying to eke out a living. And that living is not sustained and sustainable, because today you make some money, tomorrow you don't have a job, and so on and so forth. No social protection, no security of employment. So that reality is very hard. And if you add to the statistics that I've given you, which are not abstract, they are the lives that people are living, difficult lives. If you walk through the streets of Bukom or Jamestown, or you walk along Spintex Road at night with the kiosk and so on, you see young people sleeping on the road or sleeping in kiosks, some on the road and so on, if the weather allows. You have situations where people In Accra, in various parts of Accra, you have 5, 6 average to a room. That clearly cannot be the way in which Ghanaians should live by any measure. And therefore, whatever policies that we design must be able to address the issues of poverty, the issues of income and decent work, the issue of growth and transformation in the productive sectors, and so on and so forth. So the manifesto is well thought out.
Okay.
The foundation of the manifesto is a prudent macroeconomic management, which allows for inflation to come down to single digits. The target is 8% plus or minus 2%.
Okay.
Because if you have low inflation, it means you can also achieve basically price stability at lower levels, as well as able to achieve lower interest rates, because you build your interest rates based on what they call real interest rate, based on inflation level and whatever risk premium that you add to that. So in achieving low inflation, we're also able to achieve low environment of low interest rates, which then allows businesses to borrow at affordable levels and generate output, and in generating output, make profit and reinvest that profit and expand their businesses to grow the economy and employ more people, and so on. And then government also, because there's greater economic activity, has a bigger and bigger tax base to be able to tax people, meet its revenue targets, and therefore meet its expenditure targets. In particular, investing in the economy in terms of infrastructure development, what they call capital formation, that basically enables the productive sector or the real sector to grow and to produce. But the reality is that as we're sitting here today, 14.7% of our countrymen are unemployed. That's 2.1 million Ghanaians unemployed. And if you break down the statistics, it's even more horrific, because those between the ages of 15 to 29, their unemployment rate is about 30%. All right?
15 to 29.
Yes, and then if you break it further down, of the 2.1 million people who are unemployed, 68% of them are women, and 32% of them are men. So within that reality, you also see a discriminatory process. And the likelihood of somebody who's disabled to be unemployed is also 40% of that population. So we have a lot of challenges, and what the NDC manifesto seeks to do is not only to lay the foundations of a strong economy by lowering inflation, lowering interest rates, and stabilizing the exchange rate, because you know that in this country, because we are so import dependent, any adjustment in the exchange rate by way of depreciating against the major currencies like the dollar, which is probably our main benchmark, means that we are importing inflation, because we import almost $2 billion of food onto our tables. So, of course, if the exchange rate drops, then we can expect that the cost of rice, the cost of vegetable oil, the cost of tinned foods, and so on and so forth is going to go up. So that's the reality, and the proposals that we have are designed to resolve and find solutions to these grave dangers that this economy faces.
And thanks for painting a vivid picture with the figures that you've provided to back.
They're not figures. They're the lives of people captured in figures.
Yeah. So, but I'll go back to one thing you said. You talk about stability.
Yes.
You mentioned that you're looking at an inflation target of plus or minus 8.
Plus or minus 2%, around a band of 8%.
8%.
Yeah. So 2 plus 2 is 10%. Below minus 2 is 6%. So 6 to 10% bound.
Within the framework of the stability you are targeting, that is for inflation.
Yes.
Around the other major economic indicators, what are the targets you're looking at?
Well, I think that one of the important things that we have to understand, because a lot of the inflation is driven by imported inflation as a result of the depreciation of the cedi. Because as I said, we import literally everything. Now, if you really want to protect your currency, currency is a commodity.
Yeah.
It's subject to the laws and forces of demand and supply.
Okay.
So if your cedi is falling, it means that more people want the dollar against your currency, the cedi. All right. Okay. So the only way you can reverse it is for you to export enough or reduce substantially your imports so that the desire for cedis is much more than the desire for dollars.
Okay.
All right. And the only way you can do that is either you reduce the $2 billion or so of food imports that we contract from the outside world into Ghana in terms of poultry products. The chicken that you're going to eat at Christmas, I believe, is most likely going to come from chicken parts imported from Brazil or from Argentina or from the Netherlands or from Thailand or from China. Okay. The rice that you're going to eat is most likely from Vietnam, Thailand, India, Pakistan, or even in some cases China as well. Okay. The vegetable oil you're going to use to cook is most likely going to come from any of the countries that I've just mentioned. All right, and so on, sugar, and so on and so forth. So if you want to cut down on your import bill, then you really need to begin to produce the things that you eat, produce your basic needs as a country and as a society, and become more self-reliant. Naturally, you will import. You import the machineries that allow you to produce, and so on. But in importing machinery, you're importing capital formation to grow the economy. It's a very different thing from importing rice and eating it and it disappears and you haven't grown your economy. You've rather given jobs to people in Thailand, you've given jobs to people in Vietnam, and so on and so forth.
So that for you is stability.
Well, if you want to stabilize your exchange rate, you need to export. And you also need to substitute the imports that you are bringing in, which is a major charge on your foreign exchange, and therefore a great source of demand for dollars as against cedis. So you have to work on that. And one of the ways in which the NDC intends to do that is to concentrate on very key critical sectors of the economy. Okay. The first is agriculture. Okay. Agriculture still remains the mainstay of our national economy, even though its proportion is reducing gradually. It still employs quite a substantial number of Ghanaians. Okay, and if you want to be able to remove the burden of imports, then you must then begin to grow your own rice. You must begin to grow your own soya bean to make oil. You must begin to produce your own poultry. You must develop a poultry feed industry, which derives from your soya bean and your corn and so on and so forth. So you have an interlinked, integrated approach to resolving the problem of production for what you need, what you take in as a people. Yeah.
Now, in just right now, we're speaking to Chairman of the NDC Manifesto Committee on Jobs and Employment. Yes. Mr. Gossie Tanoh has joined us in studio. That's just by way of introduction. But you've already given us a background to work with when it comes to the matter of where we are when it comes to unemployment. In your consideration, which factors do you think are driving this unemployment? You said they are the lives of people that demonstrated in figures. Which factors do you think are driving this?
Well, I think there are several factors. First of all, it is poor policies. Okay. Ghana is probably one of the most endowed countries in terms of arable land. Okay. I think 64 or 70% of our national land surface is able to grow some kind of crop or other. Okay. All right. We have not invested sufficiently in producing the goods that we require, not only to eat, but also to support industry by providing a raw material base for industry. All right. So if I mention, for instance, cassava, cassava is a basic food. We eat it as gari, we eat it as a combination of corn with akple, and so on. We eat it as fufu, and so on and so forth, right? We also eat it as kokonte. Okay. But that same cassava that we eat as a part of our basic consumption requirements is also a major industrial crop. It's used to produce ethanol, which is alcohol. It's used to produce bioplastics, which is biodegradable plastics.
Okay.
It's used to produce complex sugars like dextrin. It's used to produce starch, which is found in every conceivable food item that as a binder, as a mixer, or as a stabilizer, and so on and so forth. So if you take the oil seeds, groundnuts, it's both a confectionery item and it also produces oil.
Okay.
All right, which then provides you with vegetable oil, so you don't have to import. The same with soybean. Soybean produces, if you process soybean, you generate oil, you generate milk, you also generate the residue, which is the cake.
Okay.
All right, which is a protein used for animal feed. So you use that to feed your chickens and provide them with also the base oils that they require so they can grow, bring forth more chicks, build a poultry industry, and also build an industry around eggs and so on. And then that same chicken, then also you add value by basically dressing them and cutting them into pieces and chopping them up for KFC, Chicken Republic, and so on and so forth when your children go to buy these things. So you see that there are interconnections in terms of building a self-reliant economy that is based on agriculture, that meets the basic needs of food, but as well meets the requirements of industry by providing raw materials and value addition. And in doing so, you create what they call value chains and supply chains.
Okay.
And along these value chains and supply chains, at the nodal points, you see employment from the farmer, employment from the farm laborers who support, employment for the loaders who load on trucks, employment for the driver, employment for the mate, employment for the market women who sell the goods, employment for the factory that receives the maize to produce Cerelac, and so on and so forth. So you have a generation of output, expanding the economy, expanding access to income, expanding savings, because once you have income, and income is basically over and above your basic requirements, the net is put in a bank or buy treasury bills to save, and that savings is used to lend to business people who then also go further and expand their businesses. That's how it works. That's how economies work. And in doing so, if you're managing an economy, then you must take prudent decisions that allow you to achieve these kinds of outcomes. All right? I was telling one of our colleagues that Ghana, because of its potential agricultural resource capability, all right, can be a major player in the food and beverage industry. It can be a major player with regard to materials. It can be a major player with regard to pharmaceuticals. And you must remember that when we talk about Ghana, we must understand that our playing ground, our neighborhood, is 350 million people in ECOWAS.
Okay.
That is our market.
Okay. 350 million people in ECOWAS.
And even if these 350 million people have low purchasing power, they have demands for certain basic needs.
Okay.
And Ghana has the capacity to satisfy some of these basic needs. So you must invest in the capability that allows you to grow food that is required by the populations around us, that allows you to invest in pharmaceuticals, particularly generics, because about 80 to 90% of pharmaceutical products worldwide are generic. They are generic, meaning that these are medicines that have lost their intellectual rights protection. So they no longer have Merck, Pfizer, Wellcome, Glaxo Wellcome, and so on and so forth, do not have a monopoly on those products again, because the technology that basically is used to make those drugs are now publicly available. They say they're on the shelf, the public shelf. And most of what is produced is available for all of us to be able to access and produce these drugs. And in this sub-region, it's very similar to what Ghanaians demand. analgesics, aspirin, APC, paracetamol, all right, cough mixture, the syrups, the ointments, the antibiotics, the blister packets, and so on and so forth. That market is there. So if we're a serious country, then we invest, work with our pharmaceutical industries to produce and market these products, not only to satisfy our requirements in Ghana, but also to satisfy the demand that is coming outside Ghana within the ECOWAS sub-region. Don't forget that India and Brazil build their pharmaceutical industry on generics. Today, if you want to import generics, you import from India. If you want to import what they call the active pharmaceutical ingredient, API, it's coming from India. And we all have the capacity to produce APIs, which is your active ingredient that is basically the driver for healing you when you're sick and providing the requisite drug configuration to heal you, whether you have malaria or whether you have chest pains or whether you have respiratory problems and so on. So that reality is possible.
Okay.
And what the NDC has sought to do is not only to emphasize agriculture, it's emphasizing the development of pharmaceuticals as one leg of manufacturing, food and beverage industry as another leg of manufacturing, fabrication, in terms of producing equipment, producing machines that allow us then to go into the field and expand and produce even more. Because in today's world, a cutlass is not going to take you anywhere. Neither is a hoe, unfortunately. So gradually we must modernize carefully and systematically through well-tested organizational forms where farmers basically are allowed, encouraged and supported to form groups and cooperatives so they can access these modern tools of technology and machinery to be able to improve and increase their output, improve their yields, and therefore earn more income and generate the surpluses that we find on our table and also we find at our industries to produce goods and services for all of us and for export as well.
Because when I ask you the factors, one thing you emphasize on, you're talking about policy failures that do not take advantage of the value chain.
Yes.
So that's one of the major issues. Did you identify any other things that you think has been a failure?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest problems, in this country and has been for a long time, is that, in building our manifesto, we had the core productive sectors that the next government wants to intervene in and support in partnership with the private sector and in partnership with the state commercial sector, because don't forget we have a state commercial sector that is also potentially very profitable, all right? Is basically to look at the whole corpus of the economy, all right, and see where we intervene. And intervening, we want to do it in partnership with the private sector to be able to grow the economy. And we've identified those sectors, and I've mentioned some. I've mentioned agribusiness, I've mentioned pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, fabrication, small-scale mining, but in a more rationalized, more regulated, and more incentivized system that allows people to do the right thing, rather than the galamsey that we're seeing. And that is environmentally sustainable, and it's possible. And one of the aims of the next administration is to build these model type of mining systems that allows us then to be able to take gold out responsibly, market it responsibly, and generate the requisite foreign exchange, and also use that same gold to develop a jewelry industry. You can't forever importing trinkets and earrings and so on from Italy and from China and from Dubai. We have the potential to create our own gold industry. When we were younger, we had phenomenal, capable, skilled goldsmiths that people used to come out and buy. You look at the light industries, footwear. Let me tell you a story. In the 60s, we had a company called Government Footwear Corporation. Government Shoe Factory, sorry.
Government Shoe Factory.
Yeah. Would you believe that in the mid-60s, they had huge orders from Europe?
Europe?
Yes.
Of all places?
Yes. Meaning that the quality was there, the product satisfied price competitiveness as against what the Europeans could buy. All right. The raw material availability was here because basically you have hides all over. You have hides in Burkina, hides in northern Ghana, and so on, leather goods and so on. So it is possible.
Yeah.
It is not imagination. And what this manifesto seeks to do, particularly through the intervention of the 24-hour economy, is to concentrate these different elements, focus them, finance them, and ensure that all the enablers that make for real output and production, finance, infrastructure, human development, is addressed specifically in a rational, concentrated manner to be able to boost output and therefore boost domestic supply and boost export drive. And that's what we want to do.
Before I come to you to introduce to us, you did a jobs manifesto.
Yes, we did.
Yes. Before I come to you to introduce that, you'd also realize that this government, when they came into power, made some attempts because they proposed a one district, one factory initiative. They also proposed a planting for food and jobs initiative, one village, one dam initiative. They had all kinds of initiatives that they said were geared at growing the agricultural base of a country.
Yes, it was a government of initiatives. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's become a government of failed initiatives, which is rather tragic. Because if you look at the planting and for food and jobs, for instance, it could have been a very well thought out, good program. It had been well thought out. But you don't build and you don't grow things without consideration for what the market wants. And what the market demands, both in terms of product, in terms of quality, in terms of pricing, and so on and so forth. You have to look at all the different elements: seeds, land, training of the farmer, extension services, technology adaptation, irrigation, and so on and so forth. So what the NDC has tried to do in place of what we are seeing now, which unfortunately has been somewhat of a tragic failure, could have been a great program, to be fair to them, is to look at all these things, build farmer service centers, which then becomes a focal point for extension, technology adaptation, availability of machinery, and so on. Because you have to modernize your agriculture. You have to train your farmers. You have to club them together in cooperatives so that you have the ability to work with them in a way that stabilizes their income, stabilizes their output, and also trains them in terms of being able to meet the challenges. Because don't forget that the farmer in Ghana is competing with the farmer in the United States. He's competing with the farmer in the EU. In the EU, the farmers are subsidized through what they call the Common Agricultural Policy. In the United States, they're subsidized through farmer price income support systems. We don't have subsidies because our governments are not even able to afford the fertilizer support subsidy. So we have to go find a way around it, in terms of new methods and new creative ways of growing things, of storing them, of processing them, so that we meet our basic requirements and also have a capacity to support industry and then also to export.
A government of failed initiatives.
Unfortunately, it's sad because, of course, who doesn't want irrigation? Yeah, who doesn't want a factory in their district? But there's one of the great dangers and I speak as a politician, is to be fascinated by your own buzzwords without adding the substance. And I think NPP got caught in the rhyme: one district, one factory, one this, one that. And the rhyme is not enough. People want the real deed. They want to see the reality. And a lot of money has been wasted on that. I must make a very important point. You see, in a context of very limited national resources, in a context of the squeeze that we find ourselves in because of the debt overhang, because of the complex unfolding international situation where you have right-wing governments coming in and basically raising tariff falls against everybody, in particular with very negative consequences to us in terms of our ability to trade and export our goods and services. Harnessing, managing resources is essential. Conserving resources, using them prudently is essential. The problem with all these programs was that they were abused by political interference, irrational decisions to, load the boys, the party boys and girls. We can't afford that kind of approach and culture anymore. In the jobs program for NDC, you see that we have created an entity called the National Employment Trust as one of the pillars of unfolding and implementing a sustained and serious jobs program. The National Insurance Trust is going to raise its own funding, about $1 billion. In today's, it used to be 14 billion a few months ago, but because of the exchange rate, it's now 17 billion, and I'm sure it will keep changing, right? The sources of funding are partly from the government. It's a very small quantity from the government, $40 million a year over 4 years. There's a current Ghana Skills program, which the World Bank has given IDA World Bank has given about $200 million. We want to go back and renegotiate that, and with a very justified, well thought out program, because in the interest of everybody, in particular the Europeans, to see who want to see less migrants, to assist to create jobs here so that the young people will stay. So we want to leverage on that and increase that fund to about $500 million. So that gives us $660 million immediately. Many years ago, the Bank of Ghana had a development finance window, including rural finance and so on. We want the Bank of Ghana to return to the reality of the economy that it is situated in. And become a growth institution and not just a stabilizing institution, sometimes using the wrong policy prescriptions. So one of the sources of finance will be through the development finance window of the Bank of Ghana, a very soft loan, long-term loan of $240 million. Right? And then the Development Bank of Ghana, $70 million soft loan, and of course, Exim Bank. So we aggregate the $1 billion. And what are we going to do with that $1 billion? We're going to support existing, new businesses, both private and public, to be able to expand their capacity, improve the quality of their products, improve their price competitiveness, train their staff with the requisite mindset, the requisite commitment to productivity, with the requisite ethics that makes them highly competitive in the global marketplace, to allow us to be able to produce the goods and services we need in this country and also to export. Out of that initiative of the National Employment Trust, we intend to create somewhere in the region of 900,000 jobs. The economy naturally will produce also probably another 800,000 jobs. All right? So within the 4-year period that NDC, John Mahama, will be in power, we will generate 1.7 million jobs.
1.7
million jobs. About 431,000, 431,000 averagely every year. Every year, it's estimated about 308,000 people come into the workforce. All right? So if we're producing 431,000 jobs averagely every year, then there's enough jobs for the 308,000, with a balance of 100 and something thousand remaining, 123,000 remaining, to gradually reduce the unemployment rate that we have now, which is 14.7%, 2.1 million people out of jobs. And in reducing that, by 2028, we would have reduced the unemployment rate from 14.7% to about 12%. If we project, prorate, and extrapolate 10 years ahead, if we continue with a sustained effort at investing in areas that create jobs, then basically by 2034, we should have unemployment rate below 5%. And these things you do by design and deliberately. You don't wish things. I have to tell you, I'm sure you're going to be very disappointed. There's very little about markets that are free.
Free market?
No. You must structure, purposefully intervene. Currently, as I speak, the United States is in a bitter technology war. And some people think it's only with China. It's also in a bitter technology war with the Europeans. And wants to protect its market, particularly semiconductors that are key. These are computer chips that are key for the new technology and the new energy transition. All right? So you have a situation where the United States is pumping, the government is pumping billions of dollars to support industry, to create new industry for renewable energy, for artificial intelligence, for robotics, for automation, so that its production systems become more productive, more competitive, and is able to meet the challenges of this new, what they call the fourth industrial age. We're not interested in being the fourth industrial age. We want to enter the third industrial age and adapt some of the elements of that fourth industrial age.
Okay.
So if you look at the National Employment Trust as one pillar, the second pillar of the NDC program is something called Aspire 24,
Okay.
which is built on the concept of the 24-hour economy. And what is really the symbolism of the 24-hour economy? That we all as a people are going to concentrate our forces and work as hard as we can, productively, in an organized fashion, to expand production for the things that we need, domestically, expand production to export and generate the requisite foreign exchange so we can import the machines that allow us to expand our output by creating the human being that is able to do this. It takes a type of human being to be able to generate the levels of surpluses and output that makes us competitive and makes us sell to the international community and beat the imports that are coming in. Mindset,
Okay.
work ethic,
Okay.
digital training, and digital intelligence. So we can operate and compete in this new environment. That's why I say we'll adapt some of the elements of the fourth industrial revolution. Energy transition and renewables. You need people to be digitally informed and understood. Also, some of the work that you're going to create, the work process and workflows have changed. So a lot of the people you're going to train was 1 million coders and so on. They're going to go into digital marketing, social marketing. They're going to go into computer-controlled technology. They're going to go into IoT technicians, all kinds of possibilities. We must be ready for that.
Okay.
So the Aspire 24 gives us the opportunity, the intention, and the purpose of producing a new Ghanaian worker at all levels, public, private, so that we have the talent pool that is able to meet the challenges of today's world, be able to manipulate the equipment, adapt the equipment, create the equipment that we need to expand.
How do you
the
intend to
economy.
do this?
By investing in people. How do you think China became what it is today? Many years ago, in 1978, 79, it was before 79. I represented the University of Ghana together with my friends, Mr. Ajete and so on, led by Kwesi Bochwe, to an international moot court competition. There's international law. After that, it was organized by the State Department. After that, we were taken on a tour to northeastern United States, Massachusetts, where some of the greatest schools, most accomplished schools are. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Harvard, Brown, all of them. University of Massachusetts and so on. When we were coming back to New York, on the train were Chinese people, several cars, more than 8 cars. Chinese all wearing the same thing. Coming from Harvard, these are the people who are running China today. These are the TikTok people. These are the ByteDance people. These are the EVD producers today. Do you understand? You invest in people, you build their capacity, you build their comfort with technology, you build their impulse for innovation, and build a culture that goes with that. And you see that productivity then begins to rise. And when you have productivity, you have lower costs, you are more competitive, and you're able to basically generate the goods and services that your people need. Ghana today, if we're look at productivity index, is one of the last countries in Africa and in the world.
In terms of the productivity?
Yes. The productivity per man output in Nigeria is $7,500, roughly. Senegal is about, I think, $6,000 plus. Ivory Coast is $5,000 something. Ghana is $3,700. The global productivity index is $35,000. So Ghana workers are 10 times less productive than the global standard. So if we're poor, if we're in such crisis, we must understand our situation. And it's only when you understand your situation, which NDC has demonstrated through the manifesto, that you can begin to articulate rational, sensible, purposeful solutions, such as the 24-hour economy, to address that in a focused manner, in a purposeful manner. Because what is 24-hour economy talking about? It's talking about efficiencies in supply chain. Efficiencies in output. Efficiency in supply chain. Improved productivity. Upscaling and uplifting those who are denied and discriminated against, like women, which is also part of the jobs program of upscaling skills and removing the inherent discrimination that I mentioned earlier. 67% of the people, or 68% of the people who are unemployed today are women. If you are disabled or differently abled, as they say these days, your likelihood of being unemployed is 40%, higher than the national average of 14.7%. So you have to have a concerted, concentrated effort. And what are you going to produce? Tell me. I've given you some statistics. Tell me, what are you going to produce? The $2 billion of food that you have been importing every year is what you're going to produce.
With the 24-hour economy?
Yes, absolutely. You know, there's a lot of criticism that the 24-hour economy has only a supply side, output. But it has a demand side. And that demand side is what you're importing every year. Rice. You can produce rice here in Ghana, can't you?
Yes.
Can we or can we not? Can we produce rice in Ghana?
We've proven we're able to do that.
Absolutely. Can we produce poultry in Ghana?
Yeah.
Chicken. Basic chicken. Ducks. Can we? Can we produce meat in Ghana? Can we produce vegetables? Of course we can. We were doing it. When we were younger, there was a company called Tama Food Complex. They produced sardine, they produced oil, they produced flour, they produced a whole myriad of things. If you're going to school to buy sandals, you buy Ghana-made sandals. If you want to buy a shirt, because in our school we wore white shirts for the juniors and blue shirts for the seniors. You go to Utams and go and buy arrow shirts made in Ghana. If you want to buy garments, you go to Loyalty Factory. If you want to buy a small fridge, you go to Akasanoma, Gihok, or you go to Sanyo. All Ghana-made goods. If you want to buy aluminum pots and pans, you go to Ghana. Integrated economy, producing household goods, generating employment, generating income, generating tax, and generating expansion. And that's what the 24-hour economy wants to bring about. Producing goods and services that we need, that currently we're importing, providing the domestic base for raw material supply to industry to be able to do these things that we used to do before. Integrating our economy and also generating the competitiveness and productivity that allows us to export competitively into the ECOWAS market of 350 million people and beyond. And to do this, you also must have a foreign policy that is aligned to your economic objectives. Ghana went to, if you ask anybody in the global political establishment, internationally, a lot of people credit Ghana for the resolution of the conflicts in Liberia and Sierra Leone. A lot of people credit Ghana for the extraordinary professionalism of its army, not only in conflict situations such as Sierra Leone and in Liberia, but also in Lebanon. Our foreign policy did not follow our economic interests. Do we export rice to Liberia? We don't. No. Do we export garri to Sierra Leone? We don't. You cannot isolate foreign policy from the creation and expansion of markets and opportunity. So we must. So you see in the trade and investment section of the manifesto an attempt to revise and reverse this neglect. Because once you produce, you must find a market. Not so.
Yeah.
We are importing massive amounts from China. We have made no not only as Ghana, but as Africa, we have not made the necessary inroads to convince the Chinese to open their markets to us. The first shipment of soybean, non-GMO soybean, to China from Africa, was only a few months ago. You must have a plan. Africa, Ghana has all the resources it needs. All it needs to do is to invest in its young people, invest in its population, give them the skills that I've talked to you about, provide the direction of policy that 24-hour economy intends to give in terms of purposive, concentrated attack on poverty, concentrated generation of surplus for industry, concentrated attention to pharmaceutical, fabrication, textiles, and so on. And enabling with finance, enabling with infrastructure, and enabling with human development, which is the key. Gold is nothing in the ground. It takes a human being to take it out. If that human being has no skills, it's of no use to anybody. But I want to talk a little bit, because I've talked about the elements and the pillars of the employment and jobs creation strategy. Okay. One of the biggest problems we face in this country, and the reason why the National Employment Trust is looking at small and medium-sized enterprises, is that, first of all, they tend to generate, in almost globally, the most jobs. Yeah. Secondly, there is little financing for SMEs and little financing for startups. In fact, there's zero financing for startups. Okay. You can't grow an economy without finding success through new entrepreneurship and new forays into the market to create goods and services by young people or even older people. Somebody must provide that capital to make it happen. The NET is designed to do that and to support existing industries, to generate, because when we did the modeling, we realized that SMEs generate the most jobs.
SMEs?
Yeah, in most economies. And tie them to the sectors that we're talking about. So we are going to support 1,500 enterprises. We're going to collapse the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program and the GEA into this and make it more rationalized and intervene directly in a way that is very different from the planting for food and jobs and all the things, because this is directed, targeted within the framework of the 24-hour economy.
And that was the question I was coming to. What you're proposing, as against what the NEIP is doing, how differently would you do it for it to yield the results you're looking for?
You see, you need to, you don't create economy by sentiment. You create economy by action and policy.
Okay.
And you target. What today you see as China, you see as Malaysia, you see as Singapore. Singapore doesn't have 1 grain of rice, doesn't grow, it has no iron ore, it has no gold. Japan has nothing. But meanwhile, they're able to generate the size of economy that today makes Japan, I think, the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. And Singapore has a national foreign exchange reserves in excess of, I think, $300 or $400 billion through knowledge, through purposeful interventions. Okay. Knowing who they are, they decide that they are going to become a financial hub, they're going to become a shipping hub, they're going to become a trading post for the world, and they have succeeded. We also have to do the same. That is why the 24-hour economy has targeted these various sectors. All right. And to be able to achieve these things, you need to concentrate the firepower that you have. Okay. And what we want to do is to concentrate the firepower that is inherent and within the NEIP and the GES, which has not been utilized fully to the purposes that we want to achieve in the next 4 years to create 1.7 million jobs. You can't have a fragmented system in the crisis. You must harness every resource and prudently manage that resource. But without finance, all this is talk. That's why we have to raise these amounts of money. And not only in doing that, we also are going to work with the private sector industry, particularly the venture capitalists and the institutional funds, and blended finance and even charitable sources globally. I mean, if I tell you the amount of money in the world that is parked looking for a home, it's in trillions of dollars. trillions of dollars, and we must find the mechanisms that allow us to be able to tap into these resources. But there are preconditions for that. No corruption. That's number one. Because if people feel that you're going to dissipate the resources and give it to family and friends and use it to go and buy property in England and France and so on and so forth, they're not going to give you that money.
How do we give those assurances?
The National Employment Trust is designed purposely as a trust.
Okay.
So when you're a trustee, you're subject to all the criminal liabilities for violating your trusteeship. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Right. And Mr. Mahama has said he's not going to accept any corruption from anybody. And he's laid out some important benchmarks. You can't capture the state because you're a government minister by buying state assets. He's going to get you to declare your assets. He's not going to tolerate indiscipline and abuse of power. All of those are important elements in building a culture that is free of corruption. Of course, it must transcend not just from the top. It must seep throughout the whole system. And that's why the Aspire 24 talks about work ethic. It talks about a new Ghanaian worker, a change in mindset. Because, I mean, it's natural. As a human being, if your boss is chopping, why shouldn't you chop? Do you understand? Do you understand?
Yes, I get you. I understand.
Especially if it's public resources. So we want to reverse that. And the only way you can reverse that is what JJ showed us all. Leadership by what? Example. Getting your hands dirty, working with the people, mobilizing them to produce goods and services, to produce a culture where there's solidarity, there's friendship, there's justice, there's poverty, and there's accountability. And that's what we want to bring back. Against what we have seen in the last 8 years of family and friends, of state capture, and of inept policies. I mean, I know Dr. Bameh is very enthusiastic. I admire his enthusiasm. I admire his courage in the face of the disaster.
Courage.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be very courageous.
Enthusiasm.
You have to be very courageous and very optimistic to look at the disaster that you have implemented in the last 8 years and get up and want to be president. You must be very courageous. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, you feel he shouldn't even...
Well, I mean, as I said, everybody's allowed to, but, you know, sometimes, frankly, they have a saying, do you understand what it means? Shame.
No. Okay.
Yeah. If you've done so badly, sometimes you are shamed into looking at yourself and saying, maybe let me take a breather. Let other people do it so that our country can move up and resurrect itself.
You see a certain level of shamelessness in...
Well, not so much, but you know, he ignores the reality of the misdeeds that they have implemented. He ignores the terrible economic policies that have led us to this situation. He ignores the greed and the venality that has caused the crisis that we find ourselves, particularly the overload of debt from 120 billion to 760 billion. Dr. Bawumia has not had the courage to condemn what happened in Techima. Neither has the Electoral Commission had the courage to condemn what happened in Techima in 2024. Neither has the president had the courage. How do we build a democracy? How do we build peace for domestic investors, foreign investors to invest in this economy if in the course of an election there's going to be levels of violence where, if you're not careful, can trigger into something else? Do you think business people like violence?
No, not at all.
If you are out to make profit, will you come to a society where there's potential violence because of an election, which should be a peaceful process? And not one of them has condemned the violence at Ayawaso West Oregon. Now, if you're a leader of mettle, a leader of courage, a leader who understands that you are for all Ghanaians, then when something is wrong, it's wrong. There's nothing like, if my party does it, it's right. If the other party does it, it's wrong. No, that's the wrong culture. And that's not the culture that NDC is going to foment or promote. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And we all want peace. So that these extraordinary policies that have been laid out in the manifesto can have a life and transform the people of this country's fortunes in a way that gives our children a chance. A Dutchman told me when he saw pictures of the Galamsey and the destruction of water bodies, the pollution, cyanide, arsenic, mercury. Do you know what he said? He said, your leaders don't care about the Ghanaian children. Your leaders do not care about the Ghanaian children. Those who are coming out. Because we're destroying everything and they have no inheritance. The patrimony that was left for us, that they inherited in 2017, they are destroying it happily by greed. And that must be reversed. And I believe the Ghanaian people are awakened enough to reverse that. Well, and ensure that, as Obama said, that the righteous wind that is behind NDC will lead this country to a safe berth and a safe haven on 7th January 2025 with John Mahama as a new president. A new dispensation, a new paradigm of peace, prosperity, but it's going to be harder. The next 4 years are going to be so difficult. But the resilience of Ghanaians is new. The capacity to absorb and to transform is new. In 1983, when we had the famine, everybody thought we were going to collapse, but we rose. We rose to the point where we started exporting food to Angola and to other parts of Africa. And so we will rise again. I see young people saying that if they were given the opportunity to do a PhD in Ghana or have a visa, what would they choose? They said they would choose a visa. I believe the next 4 years will change their minds.
4 years?
Yes. We are going to transform this country inch by inch, slowly, with pain, purposefully, and ensure that Ghanaians begin to believe in themselves again and believe that they have the power and the authority to transform our circumstances. And we're going to do that through mobilization. Because it's not just enough to have these policies and objectives. You must mobilize the people through your political structures, through your community interventions, to begin to see that they have the authority and the power to transform their situation. When SS came, what happened? When electrification came, what happened? Communities were vying with each other to buy electrical poles to connect. They were raising the money themselves. That's the Ghanaian for you. When SS school buildings were built and there were no roofs or no staff quarters, communities came together and roofed their buildings and built staff quarters. That is the Ghanaian for you. And it's that resource, that capacity of the Ghanaian that John Mahama wants to nurture, wants to be part of, to transform this country through the power and empowerment of not only men, but of women, of the youth. So this 30% that we're seeing of youth unemployment, 3 in every 10 youth that you see will become gradually a thing of the past.
Explanations be given on the many initiatives they have in a manifesto.
Programs and policies.
Programs and policies.
This initiative scares me.
Why? What is it about the initiative?
Many MPP initiatives. We don't want to be caught in that bad luck. Huh?
But quite a couple of things here, because this is even on the front of jobs and employment.
Sure.
And there are many other places where you are promising so many things.
Not promising. I mean, these are well thought out programs. It doesn't mean that the rollout will be immediate, but they're incremental. And you've seen the interconnections that I've tried to establish between the different policies related to the different sectors and so on. So they will be rolled out gradually as we go along. Yeah.
Listening to you, because there are those who ask questions and usually suggest that the 24-hour economy policy is not clear. But I hear you trying to connect the 24-hour economy policy to everything else you've said.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, look, let me give you a classic example of the ethos behind the 24-hour economy. Right? We're in a war situation as a country. It's not a war against any neighbor. It's not a war with ourselves. It's a war against the debilitating, oppressive oppressive poverty that we find ourselves in.
Okay.
Overlaid by debt and a future which is unclear. So it cannot be business as usual. So the 24-hour economy is to marshal all the productive forces that you have and intervene purposefully in the economy to generate the requisite output, supply, structures, institutions that will allow you to uplift your economy, pay your debt, provide food on the table for your citizens, and be able to also export to the rest of the world. In sum, that is what it's all about. And you stage it in terms of your emphasis on the productive sectors that you want to support, what is going to enable that digital economy, finance, technology, infrastructure, and all of that is laid out. And so each component of the manifesto works towards this rollout of this program, which is on a war footing to overcome the challenges that we face as a country.
There are many people who ask the question of, so if you start rolling out the 20...
after the war, for instance, let's go even before the war. You know, in 1929, there was a massive depression in the United States. Millions of people out of work. Thousands committed suicide, losing money on the stock market. People who had been hitherto wealthy were queuing up in food rationing lines to get food, you know, and so on. That's how bad the collapse in the United States economy, the global economy, was in 1929. It took a concentrated marshalling of all the forces, change in institutions, change in laws, to be able to restore the productive capacity of the United States, generate purchasing power and demand, and reverse the total deflation and crisis in the U.S. economy. The 24-hour economy is designed as an emergency response to the depth of our crisis. And it's going to involve every sector of this economy and all the enablers of security, of technology, of, finance, and so on and so forth, to support agriculture and manufacturing, tourism, and small-scale mining as the anchor real sector areas that the 24-hour economy is going to support.
Like any other policy, once you're implementing, you are doing an assessment.
Absolutely.
How do you assess whether or not the 24-hour economy is succeeding?
Well, the president-to-be has announced, and it's incorporated in the manifesto, that there will be an office specifically dedicated to monitoring and evaluating, adjusting, recalibrating the 24-hour economy so that he has oversight in the presidential Flagstaff House. Yeah. So clearly that shows leadership commitment. And in politics, leadership commitment means everybody basically falls in line. All right? Institutions, everybody falls in line. You manage it rationally, prudently, and you basically test whether you are getting the results. If you're not getting it, you go in and you fix it. Okay? The counterpart to that for the jobs is what we call the modernization and the C. You have to create an environment where all these wonderful policies about creating jobs are established in a framework that allows those policies to mature, materialize, and be substantial and substantive. So the man, or the M in the Man Up C, is modernizing our legal framework to allow for the 24-hour economy job creation strategy to find teeth, to find legs, to find eyes, to find a head, to be able to walk and implement. All right? And within that framework, you have what we call a national coordinating committee, which is under the Ministry of Employment. And the Ministry of Employment is going to be transformed from not just from being just a labor relations organization to a real employment creation, motivating policy impulse, in terms of creating jobs and creating the requisite requirements of the 24-hour economy in terms of security support, adjusting labor laws that take into account new workflows and new work processes like remote learning and so on and so forth. So it's a total program. And within the framework of the jobs, similar to what is going to be happening at the Flagstaff House under the presidency at the 24-hour economy office, you're going to have a situation where we have, for many years, the NDC developed in the 2014-15 what they call the Ghana Labor Market Management Information Systems.
Okay.
We need to complete that, because then that will give us a total overview of what is happening in the employment market.
Okay.
So if this sector is losing jobs, we find out why it's losing jobs. And how do we reverse that? Is that loss of jobs doesn't mean that people are transferring to other new areas of the economy that are emerging and absorbing jobs. So we have a total view. So we know where to go in, fix, remedy, promote, and improve. Okay. And productivity is the base of all this. There are also elements within the work environment that we must address. If you look at the employment statistics, in the workforce, only 20% are involved in paid jobs.
Okay.
That's they go to work, they earn a salary at the end of the month.
That's 20%.
Only 20%.
Okay.
The rest are, vulnerable employment.
Okay.
Okay. So what we want to do is basically to expand it. And if you are in vulnerable employment, you have problems with your not only job security, just the working conditions themselves. Yeah. We need to reverse that.
Okay.
And even in the formal sector, you need to ensure that the environment in which people work are conducive.
Okay.
So we need to, one of the proposals is to revise the 1970 Factory and Shops Act, which basically will bring it up to modern times.
Okay.
To look at the different workflows and different work processes, its monitoring, its evaluation, and constant inspection. Because the Ministry of Labor is made up of Labor Department, Factory and Inspections Inspectorate, and then the Department of Cooperatives. All of these must come together to meet the challenges of the 24-hour economy within a legal framework, which is the new Employment Act that we want to revise to reflect these new trends and new policies that we want to promote. And there are some elements also. If you look at what is happening in the mines, even at the port,
okay.
You see, you can't motivate a workforce. You cannot get the best from a worker. You cannot achieve maximum productivity and commitment to the workplace and to objectives of the workplace if the worker feels insecure, he feels he's being oppressed, he feels that his rights are being trampled. So one of the proposals is to implement the ILO Convention 158, which basically protects workers against arbitrary dismissal, oppression at the workplace, and respect workers' rights. So this is part of the corpus of creating a conducive work environment for workers to feel that they are wanted, for workers to get commitment to their work process, and for workers to be committed to the objectives of the enterprise that they work for, whether in the public or private sector.
So you're not only looking at creating new jobs, but
the environment, yes, and securing and then creating the environment. Once you've created the jobs, you must protect the workers and their workers' rights. Don't you have to do that? You have to do that. You must ensure occupational health and safety. And one of the key laws, especially for those who work in factory spaces and so on, where machinery, moving parts and so on are prevalent, you get a lot of injuries. In fact, we had a Twitter space a conference on the jobs section of the manifesto, where we had about 700 or 800 people joining. Okay. And one of the speakers spoke about the fact that the work environment and occupational health and safety is something that we are not emphasizing enough.
Okay.
Our manifesto addresses that through the amendments and the improvement in the 1970 Factory Shops Act. Okay. But beyond that, we also want to look at the 1987 PNDC law on workmen's compensation, so that you have remedies for a situation where people get injured. There's compensation. It's timely. It also provides for the requisite rehabilitation and physio and so on to get them back to work and to get them to be economically productive after injury. So you have all of that. Okay. So the modernize relates to working conditions, supervision and evaluation and inspection of those working conditions and enforcement, It looks at labor information, allows us to track and monitor and evaluate what is happening in the labor market at the apex of the Minister of Employment, who's no longer now just doing collective bargaining issues, but is basically looking at also the whole generation of employment within the economy of Ghana, and where employment is receding and where employment is increasing, and where necessary boosts and applications must be applied to ensure that constantly there is work available for the young people of this country. You know, in most central banks, to show you how important employment is, in most central banks, their mandate is not just for price stabilization, that's inflation fighting, but full employment.
Full employment?
Yes. That used to be the mandate of the Bank of Ghana, is the mandate of the Federal Reserve Board, is the mandate of many central banks. I believe the Bank of England as well.
You said it used to be a mandate of the Bank
No, right now the Bank of Ghana is now just a price stabilizer using monetary tools that don't work. But that's another matter. I don't want to get into that. You heard from Honorable Togbe Afede and his criticism of the Bank of Ghana in terms of the misdirection and misthought inflation fighting. And our manifesto addresses that, to look at, because the Bank of Ghana is independent, of course, there has to be a dialogue, you know, and you have to let them see that because look, if your stabilization and monetary policies are working, you don't have to go to the IMF 17 times in less than 30 years. And that's what we've done. So clearly there's something wrong with the way in which we're managing our economy. And it's structural, and we know it's structural. And we need to overcome and rebuild that economy in a way that is basically self-reliant and is able to generate the surpluses that allow it to grow and expand without having every 5 minutes to go to the IMF for a bailout.
Because I was, when you were talking about the minister watching job losses against
because you need data for that. You need real-time data. I mean, the whole world today is about data. There's a new book I hear, it's called Data Capitalism. I haven't heard about it. I haven't read it, but it emphasizes the fact that everything now is about data. AI is about data. Taking large language models and being able to train a computer to be able to think for itself, teach itself, do predictions, and so on and so forth, provide solutions for you to adapt your business environment, your governmental policy, and so on and so forth. IoT is about data. Different devices interconnected through the internet to share data in real time and to manipulate and do things. Blockchain is about data. If we enter Mr. Sena, you bought a land in Dodua, we enter it on the public ledger, which is blockchain. Nobody can change it. Nobody in lands department can manipulate it and go and give the document to somebody else, and that same land is sold 10 times behind your back. Data. And the use of data to create value, to create wealth, and to create expansion. That's what I mean by enabling with the digital intelligence, the digital skills that allow us to enter the new reinforced 24-hour economy that allows us to use these tools to move into the third industrial revolution, borrowing from the fourth industrial revolution that these folks have embarked on, which we will follow, but we must do the basic things first.
Because
so in short, that was the M in the man up C, and the C is the coordination that I've mentioned at the level of the employment in relation to jobs creation, and the coordination at the level of the presidency in the Flagstaff House with regard to the 24-hour economy. And there are many examples of concentrated economic programs to overcome the crisis. One of the interesting models is Germany after the war. It was completely shattered, destroyed. You should look at the pictures of Dresden. All right, it's a bit like what you're seeing in Gaza today, this extraordinary repression and genocide that the International Court has referred to. Look at the pictures. Total destruction. So the Germans decided after the war that they had to face their challenges. They had to overcome the destruction of the Second World War, which they brought upon themselves, and rebuild a new society, culturally, economically. Today, Germany is, I think, is the fourth largest economy in the world. Because China has appeared, everybody has been relegated, one step below.
We have to bring this to a close. But
so let me finish.
Yeah, okay.
They brought labor, industry, government, private sector as partners to rebuild. That is what the 24-hour economy intends to do. Partnership for growth, for recovery, for transformation, and for stabilization.
A few hurdles to clear.
Yes, sir.
One, the trust in politicians is an all-time low. How do you expect the Ghanaian to believe that all this, what you're saying, will be done and implemented in full?
I think one of the things I've tried to explain to you is that we are going to mold a new mindset. And that applies to politicians. Aspire 24 applies to every Ghanaian. And I've always mentioned the impact of corruption in misallocating resources and basically creating irrational allocation of resources that militate against our well-being as a country. The day Ghanaians are able to link corruption to the fact that they can't have 3 square meals a day is a day that they will hold their politicians to account. So it's not just the politicians. It's the Ghanaian people themselves who must hold the politicians to account. But we, on our part, will generate that new idea of service, of commitment to the institutions that you work, commitment to the nation, and efficiency in discharging our duties and building a new paradigm where political leadership is not to go to parliament or to be a minister and steal, but is to serve and to implement, to ensure that your fellow brethren and your fellow sisters are uplifted. That is the point about upscaling. Leveling up, removing the inequities, building skills, giving everybody a chance and a path for progress. Social democracy creates opportunity and creates the conditions for people to be able to access those opportunities and thrive. And that's what we intend to do through new leadership. Leadership by example. Leadership that's ethically motivated, has the mentality of Aspire 24. 24-hour economy, Aspire 24.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
To conclude, you said you're comparing us to a war situation?
But don't you see this poverty? Look, 41.3% of Ghanaians are multidimensionally poor. In 2022, 875,000 Ghanaians went into poverty. 7.3 million Ghanaians can barely make 1 meal a day. Isn't that a war situation? It's a war situation. It's a war against poverty. That's what the 24-hour economy is about. And I invite you to join, and you too, sir.
Well, how important do you think these elections are?
They're important because I think it gives the opportunity for us to reset the national agenda, mold it and move it into a new direction, away from the darkness that we have seen in the last 4 years. There's a saying, my mother used to tell me, that the darker it becomes, that is when you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I believe the NDC, as I said, pushed, propelled by a righteous wind, will land this country into a safe berth and a safe haven on December 7th. And we'll see a new renewal, a new regeneration of our national purpose, of our national intent to be able to stand up tall again and say that, beat our chest proudly, that truly we are Ghanaians, we're Kwame Nkrumah's sons and daughters.
Mr. Tanoh.
Yes, sir.
Always a pleasure.
It's my pleasure.
And enlightening talking to you.
I've been listening to you on Elijah. I didn't know you were such a lively interviewer. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. Gossie Tanoh is chairman of the NDC Manifesto Committee on Jobs and Employment. Join us this evening for a conversation